Before we begin, take a deep breath and let the noise of the day slowly fade. Unclench your jaw, soften your eyes, and let the weight of modern life melt away. Tonight, we're not chasing action or drama. We're wandering into the forgotten corridors of boring history, where medieval echoes linger and dark tales unfold like fading ink on parchment. Welcome to Midnight Sleepless, a resting place for tired minds, where the Middle Ages, ancient empires, and strange, dark history stories drift by like soft clouds. Here, knights, castles, and quiet empires return, not with a roar, but with a whisper. Let me know in the comments, where in the world are you listening from, and what time is it there? And if you enjoyed these slow, sleepy journeys through medieval times, boring facts, and forgotten worlds, a gentle tap on the subscribe button helps keep this calm storytelling alive. Now, let the story begin. You awake to the soft rattle of felt against wood. The night has passed quietly, with only the wind to interrupt the silence. The steppe outside stretches endlessly in all directions, a sea of grasses turned golden under the rising sun. From within your circular home, a yurt built by your family's hands, you feel the slow warmth beginning to gather, seeping through the stitched seams and layered wool that shelter you from the chill dot. This is your world. You are not a warrior, not a soldier in the Khan's armies, nor a noble with a lineage traced in scrolls. You are a peasant of the Mongol Empire. Your life is quiet, steady, and mostly unnoticed by the scribes of history. Yet here, within this modest shelter, bound by wooden ribs and canvas, your existence is a small, vital thread in the great weaving of empire. The yurt called a ger in your tongues more than a house. It is a circle of life. Built from lattice walls and a domed roof, its framework is flexible yet firm, designed for dismantling and reassembly as the seasons demand. The felt, made from compressed sheep's wool, carries the scent of lanolin and campfires, a mingling of warmth and earthiness that clings gently to every breath. Each morning, when the smoke hole at the top is opened and the sunlight streams through in a focused beam, the space inside glows with a gentle amber light. Around you are the familiar textures of life. A carved wooden chest holds your family's garments, woolen dill robes in muted colors, stitched with care. A small hearth, its stones worn smooth from use, sits in the center of the yurt, anchoring everything. Above it, hanging from wooden pegs, are simple cooking tools: a blackened pot, a pair of tongs, a ladle worn by repetition. The hearth is not just for food. It is the heart of the home, the place where stories are shared in whispers and old songs float just above the crackle of fire. Outside, you hear the soft bleating of sheep. Your brother has gone to check the herd already, his figure vanishing slowly into the rising mist just before dawn. The animals, sheep, goats, and the sturdy Bactrian camels are your family's wealth, not in coins or jewels, but in milk, wool, and meat. You remember learning to tell one camel from another by the sway of its gait, the tilt of its head. Life here is circular. With each season, the family moves. Winter brings a shift toward the sheltered valleys, where the wind is less fierce. Spring, you journey again to the fresh pastures, seeking grazing lands untouched since the last thaw. The yurt comes with you, packed in pieces onto a wooden cart, drawn by oxen or tied atop a camel's hump. It is always the same yurt, always the same home, just relocated under a new stretch of sky. Each place has its own scent. The valley where you spent last summer smelled of wild thyme and drying dung. The high hills to the west carried the perfume of moss and wine-worn stone. In every new camp, your mother walks slowly in a circle before choosing where the yurt shall stand. It's always east-facing to greet the dawn. The air is quiet now, save for the distant rustling of grass. You step outside, feet wrapped in leather-soled boots. The dew still clings to the earth, cool and sharp beneath your steps. Above you, the clouds drift slowly, their shadows crawling across the landscape in long, yawning sweeps. You notice the neighbors' yards not far with your cousins. Your grandmother, a friend from childhood, who now carries her own child swaddled against her chest. You nod silently as you pass, a shared rhythm of labor and life binding all of you together. There is little need for words this early in the day. In the distance, smoke curls into the sky. Someone has already begun heating water for Tsuuded Sai, made with salt, butter, and milk. The scent will reach you soon enough, soft and savory, a promise of warmth after the morning's first chores. As you pull the yurts out of flap, closed again, you feel the texture of the felt beneath your fingers, rough, dense, faintly warm. You think of how your sister once dyed a strip of wool with wild berries to mark her corner of the bedroll. The stain has faded now, but you still remember in this place, in this moment. You are not part of a grand battle or sweeping conquest. You are part of something slower, quieter. A world held together by thread, by smoke, by footsteps pressed into soil that no map ever marked. And so, beneath the quiet dome of your yurt, with the morning sun just beginning to rise, you breathe in the smell of wool and ash. The day has begun, softly and simply, as it always has. And perhaps, as it always will. The hours move gently forward as the sun continues its slow rise across the steppe, casting long, thin beams that stretch across the grassland like pale ribbons. Inside the yurt, the day has taken form, not with haste or urgency, but through quiet rituals passed down in gestures rather than words. Your mother sits cross-legged near the hearth, stirring a pot of steaming milk tea, the wooden spoon making soft, rhythmic sounds as it moves through the liquid. Each motion is steady, neither hurried nor idle, like the breathing of the earth itself. The smell of Tsuuded Sai fills the space, soft warmth curling into every corner of the round home. The tea's not sweet like the stories of foreign lands tell. Instead, it carries a mild saltiness, rich with a pat of butter and a trace of the smoky fire below. You sip it slowly, its warmth traveling gently down your throat, anchoring you to the present. With it, a small dish of dried curds rouleau rests in your hand. The texture is hard, dry, and sour at first, but with time it softens in your mouth, releasing a tangy sharpness that is oddly satisfying. These are the flavors of your life: milk, salt, smoke, and time. Outside, your older cousin adjusts the ties on a horse's tack, the creaking of leather, the occasional snort from the animal, and the wind catching at the edges of your tented walls blend into a soundscape that feels both ancient and immediate. The horse, a compact, sturdy creature, is not just transportation, it is memory, labor, and livelihood. Children learn to ride before they can write their names. You remember the feel of the saddle beneath you on your first solo ride, your fingers clutching the mane more than the reins. The world galloping in rhythm with your breath. Tasks fill the day, but they do not press in the way clocks or bells might. Time here is not marked by ticking hands, but by the movements of the sun, the needs of the herd, and the slow churn of seasons. Your younger brother has taken a few goats out to graze, his figure trailing through the tall grass in a zigzag line. You follow with your eyes, tracing the slope of the hill behind him, where purple wildflowers peek through like scattered scraps of dyed cloth. Later in the morning, you take up your own work. A pile of wool lies beside you, sheared from your own sheep, washed in a nearby stream, and now ready to be combed and spun. You drag the combs through it, gently teasing out tangles, releasing the scent of lanolin and fresh air with each pass. The fibers float up like dandelion tufts, catching the light before settling again on your lap. You twist a strand between your fingers, slowly, carefully, pulling it into a long, even cord. It is an act that requires neither deep thought nor distracted patience. the kind that grows from doing the same thing over many seasons. Your grandmother once told you that wool carries the warmth of the animal's breath. You find that thought comforting, as though each garment spun by your hand offers not only protection from the cold, but a silent memory of the herd's closeness. Of winter nights, when animals and humans slept not far apart, sharing heat beneath shared roofs, midday arrives quietly. The sun stands higher now, casting sharper lines across the land. Shadows shorten, and the yurt grows warmer. The walls breathe with the temperature, felt expanding and contracting like a living skin. You open a small flap to let the breeze pass through. It carries with it the scent of dry grass, a faint trace of dung smoke from a neighboring hearth, and something sweet from the wildflowers still blooming in the northern field. A guest arrives, announced not by speech, but by the sound of hooves and the soft clink of stirrups. He is a trader your father knows, riding in from the south with a satchel of wares and stories from the road. He is greeted not with ceremony, but with a cup of tea and a quiet place to rest. This is how hospitality works here, without fanfare, but never absent. The guest offers dried fruit from the oases farther south, dark, wrinkled raisins and slivers of apricot, their sweetness a sudden contrast to your usual meals. You taste one slowly, letting it dissolve against your tongue like sunlight melting across a stone. He speaks little, this man, but when he does, it is of distance of mountains, with sharp snow ridges and valleys so green they hurt the eyes. He mentions cities too, with walls and towers, but his voice does not dwell there. You sense he prefers the open road, the uncertainty of where the next fire will be lit. You think of the stories your uncle told once, a Khania of the great Silk Road caravans that passed quietly through the empire's arteries, winding like rivers across deserts and plains, as the trader unrolls a bolt of cloth, dyed in muted blues and dusty reds. Your mother runs her fingers across it, feeling the weave. She does not ask where it came from, China, perhaps, or Samarkand. It doesn't matter. Here, things arrive, not with origins, but with usefulness. The trader leaves as gently as he came, with a nod and the faint scent of horse sweat and dust trailing behind. The yurt feels quieter after he goes, as though the stillness has returned fully to itself. You resume spinning wool, your fingers tracing soft spirals once again. The sunlight has begun to slant slightly, brushing the walls with gold. Later, you help your mother mend a tear in the deal your father wears. The needle is bone smooth from years of use. The thread is horsehair, stiff at first, but strong. You run your fingers along the edge of the fabric, feeling the wear, the places where time has softened what was once new. The wind picks up again in the late afternoon, spring through the grass like a story half told. You pause and listen, wondering what it says. Perhaps nothing. Perhaps only what it always says, that life continues here, quietly wrapped in wool, warmed by fire, and measured not in great events, but in careful, repeated acts of living. The sun has lowered now, casting a deeper hue across the open steppe. Shadows lengthen and soften, turning the grasses to bronze. The breeze that once carried the scent of wildflowers now brings with it the cool hush of evening. The day has folded into itself, not with finality, but with the calm quiet of something that understands how to begin again tomorrow. Inside the yurt, the hearth is lit. The crackle of dried dung kindling collected earlier by your sister fills the space with its familiar sound. It is not an angry fire, nor a quick one. 8 burns slow and low, a modest flame that licks gently at the blackened stones beneath the pot. You stir the stew with steady hands, the scent of boiled mutton rising like a warm fog. A pinch of salt, a handful of millet, and a slow simmer would carry this meal from your hands to the bellies of those you love, the way it has for years, and will again for many more. Your father enters silently. His boots are dusty, his eyes heavy-lidded, but calm. He does not speak at first, but kneels near the fire, resting his hands over his knees, palms up. He watches the flame, and you watch him. The silence is not empty. Here it is full of meaning, of presence, of quiet regard for the moment. After a time, he speaks a few low words about the health of the goats, the state of the pasture, the tracks he saw near the western ridge, possibly wolves, though far off still. You nod. There will be time to check tomorrow. The family gathers, without being called. Your grandmother enters last, wrapped in a shawl, dyed from onion skins and faded over many seasons. She hums softly under her breath, an old song, one you've heard since childhood, though the words have long since blurred into lullaby. Her hands, veined and lined, settle into the rhythm of eating with practiced grace. The meal is served from one pot, as always, each person receiving a scoop in a wooden bowl, smoothed by decades of washing and passing. As you eat, no voices rise above the flame, only murmurs, soft laughter, the clink of a spoon against the pot. This, too, is tradition not taught in words, but inherited through days like these: the fire, the circle, the food shared without ceremony. After the meal, you step outside once more. The sky has deepened, shifting from dusty blue to violet, and now into the dark ink of approaching night. Stars blink into being one by one, their presence slow and steady. No candles are needed here. The moon, when it comes, will be enough. You walk toward the grazing line where the animals have settled. The sheep rest close together, bodies like woolen rocks beneath the sky. A dog rises as you approach, tail wagging once before it curls again. By your feet, you kneel and press your hand to its back, feeling the warmth there, the slow breathing that mirrors your own. Nearby, the horses rustle softly, the bells tied to their manes tinkling faintly in the dark. That sound, that tiny, silver chime of distant bells, silver gentlest music of your life. It tells you the animals are near, that the world is still in place. Looking out, the land stretches into darkness. No fences, no gates, just space, rolling on and on beneath the stars. You wonder what it must be like in the cities the trader spoke of, to have walls that end the world, to sleep without sky above your roof. But that thought does not linger. You have your own sky, and it is vast enough. Returning to the yurt, you pass the neighbor's tent. A woman stands outside, brushing out a piece of felt with a wooden comb. Her child sleeps inside, you assume, wrapped tightly in wool, lulled by the same winds that now brush past your cheeks. She nods once, and you return it. A simple exchange. Enough. Inside. Your sleeping space has been unrolled thick quilts, layered atop a worn rug, a small pillow filled with straw. The warmth of the day still clings faintly to the floor, but already the air cools. You lie down, pulling the top blanket to your chin. Around you, the yurt settles into its nighttime silence. The fire fading to embers, glowing dimly against the hearthstone above. Through the round smoke hole, you can see a slice of sky, a constellation you do not name, but always recognize as just beginning its rise. You trace it with your eyes, remembering how your grandmother once said, those stars were the eyes of the ancestors. Watching to be sure, you lived with steadiness, with patience. You do not fear sleep here. It comes like everything else, slowly, without force, a soft arrival that drapes itself over your limbs like an extra blanket. The sounds of night take their place, the distant lowing of a cow, the shuffle of wind through the grass, the final creak of the yurt's frame settling for the night. These are not interruptions. They are lullabies. Tomorrow will come with its small, steady labors, spinning, milking, gathering, walking. None of them loud, none of them new, but each is part of a rhythm older than any scroll, any stone engraving, any empire's edict. You were part of it, not by choice or force, but by inheritance. And as you lie there, eyes growing heavier, you feel not separate from history, but woven into it. Quietly, tenderly, completely. The step, as always, is quiet. Its vastness does not boast, nor does it try to impress. It simply continues mile after mile of golden grass and slow wind, its curves shaped not by walls or roads, but by time and hooves and weather. From the low ridge just beyond your camp, you can see forever a gently rippling plain that seems to breathe as the day warms and the light shifts across its surface. And it is here, seated cross-legged on a smooth, sun-warmed stone, that you first notice the distant line of movement on the horizon. Not a storm, not a herd, something more deliberate. You squint. Your hand rises to shade your eyes. There, faint and far, are riders. You do not call out. You do not rise. You only watch. They are still distant enough to be unreal, like a story, retold too many times. But you recognize the patterns, the disciplined pace, spacing, the way dust trails behind them in a long, purposeful veil. This is not a caravan. This is the Khan's riders, messengers, soldiers, scouts, perhaps an envoy, perhaps something else. You are a peasant, a herder. Your yurt is down in the hollow, hidden by a ring of short trees and the slow smoke of a midday fire. Your goats graze in the near distance. Your wife is combing wool. Your son is scraping a hide, humming as he works. Life is as it has always been done, touched by the politics of khans and courts. And yet, here they come. You remain seated, unmoving, the wind tugging at your robe. You do not feel fear, exactly. You know your family has done nothing to draw notice. You've paid your taxes, your herds are marked. Your sons are not yet old enough for conscription, but still, when the empire moves even at a distance, you feel it like a weight in the bones. The riders grow clearer now. You can make out the glint of sunlight on metal, the faint flutter of banners stitched with geometric emblems. The horses are sturdy, their legs thick and sure. Their riders sit upright, clothed in robes of dark blue and brown, their bows strapped behind their shoulders, their gaze straight ahead. They do not waver, okay? They do not scan the land for onlookers, okay? They ride through the world as if they own it because, in truth, they do. You think of the stories your grandfather used to tell. Stories of Chinggis come long before your time, but never far from your thoughts. Of how he unified the tribes, how he burned cities and built roads, how his name could carry peace or terror depending on who spoke it. You think of those tales now, not as legend, but as something very much alive riding now across your horizon, kicking up dust that will settle in your field. The riders are not coming toward your camp. They are moving east to west, cutting across the slope far beyond your grazing lands. Still, you sit, watching. You wonder what orders they carry, its name they speak, whether the next camp over will receive them, whether they'll stop to rest or ride through the night. Your goats remain unaware. A few of them lift their heads to sniff the wind, then return to grazing. The breeze carries no danger, only dry grass and the scent of horse sweat. Still, you do not move. There's something humbling in seeing the empire like this, not on parchment maps, not in declarations, but in motion. A line of mounted men disappearing into the vastness, their presence, like a stone tossed into still water. The ripples reach you, even if they never touch your skin. You rise slowly now, brushing dust from your hands. You walk a short way down the hill, keeping your eyes on the riders until they vanish behind her eyes. The dust remains for a while, suspended in the air like the last breath of a story, then settles, becoming part of the land again. Back at camp, your wife glances up as you approach. You nod once, The Khan's men, you say. She doesn't ask more. She only looks toward the horizon, then back to her wool. The empire passes by. It does not need to stop to be felt. You sit near the fire, its smoke rising in thin threads. Your son runs past, chasing a chicken with a piece of string. A kettle simmers quietly. Its life resumes, not as if nothing happened, but as if it always happens. The empire moves, and the steppe watches, and the steppe returns to what it was, patient, wide, and deeply still. And so do you. The riders are long gone now. It's a memory hanging in the air like dust that never quite settles. But their presence lingers the same way a hoofprint holds its shape in the earth long after the horse has passed. That evening, as the sun leans low and the steppe stretches under its golden light, you still think of them? Their upright posture, the silence of their passing, the weight of the banners that did not flutter, but hung still and heavy in the windless air. You did not speak much of it after returning to the yurt. There was no need. Your wife had seen riders before when she was a girl. Your father had served, briefly mending tack for a company that passed through these parts. Your son, though he had never seen them until now, he asked only once, while scrubbing ash from the cooking pot, "Do they know who we are?" You paused before answering. "No," you said. And they don't need to. Accepted this. But you could tell his thoughts lingered. Later, you saw him crouching on the edge of the grazing field, carving small horses from scraps of wood with a dull knife, 4 in a line, then 6, then 8. T did not name them. He simply moved them across a patch of bare soil, over and over, leaving tiny tracks behind. The empire touches your life in small, quiet ways. A coin passed from a passing merchant, stamped with an unfamiliar symbol. A decree shared from camp to camp, always 2 weeks old by the time it reaches you. A new tax, a requirement to send wool in bundles instead of sacks. Nothing dramatic, nothing cruel. It's just steady, impersonal motion. You remember your grandfather's stories, not just the ones about war and conquest, but the quieter ones, about roads being cleared by decree, about bridges built in distant places you'll never see, about the Khan's messengers traveling day and night, changing horses at stations you've only heard of in passing, about punishments for theft that were swift, and about trade that now reached deeper into the world. Everything moves faster now. Your grandfather once said, seated beside the fire, his breath curling like smoke in the air. But we don't. We move as we always have. You didn't fully understand him then. You do now. The days pass. The grass grows longer, browner at the tips. The animals shift toward different grazing lands, following instinct and the memory of past seasons. You move camp, not far, just enough to give the earth time to recover. The yurt is taken down, packed, and raised again with quiet efficiency. Your son helps with the center pole. Now he's taller this year, steadier. A T, no longer asks why things are done. He simply does them. One evening, near the new camp, a merchant arrives on horseback. His robe is patched at the shoulder, but his boots are fine-stitched from red leather and dusted in powdery grit from some far-off road. He carries spices, beads, and lengths of dyed fabric. He speaks quickly, moving from camp to camp, seeking trade. You offer wool, and in return, he gives you salt and a curved needle made of copper, which he claims is from Samarkand. He speaks of news, a skirmish near the river in the west, a tribute sent from a southern kingdom, census to begin in the coming months. He mentions the Khan's younger son, something about marriage, alliances, a celebration you will never attend. You nod. You ask no questions. You trade and listen. Then you watch him ride away, his saddle creaking under weight, his voice already calling to the next cluster of YURTS. At night, lying beside the embers of the fire, You stare up at the smoke hole again. The stars are clear tonight, arranged in patterns that your grandfather used to name. The warrior's bow, the endless yurt, the twin horses. You remember those stories too. Not for their drama, but for their stillness. The empire is out there riding, building, changing. But here, under this quiet sky, you tend goats, mend harnesses, skim milk, and braid rope from horsehair. You pass days in the same motions your ancestors once did. You know how to read the clouds, how to walk barefoot without crushing the grasses, how to hear a storm long before it arrives. Your wife says little, but her work speaks volumes. Each panel of felt she stitches into the yurt's lining makes the home warmer. Each handful of dried cheese she stores will see you through the leaner days. Your daughter gathers firewood without asking. Your son now leads the herd himself, walking ahead with a quiet confidence you recognize from your own youth. You have learned to live beneath the empire's shadow, afraid, not defiant, just steady. You know that even shadows must pass, that even the greatest riders vanish behind hills, and sometimes, late in the night, you dream not of banners or horses, but of your grandfather's voice beside the fire. Stay small, he once said, his eyes reflecting flame. Let the empire ride past. The step will still be here when they're gone. You turn in your bed, pulling the quilt higher against the chill. The wind outside has picked up again, rustling the tent lines, carrying the scent of dry grass and something distant, maybe rain, maybe the smoke of another camp far away. You close your eyes. Tomorrow, you will check the herd for signs of sickness. You'll mend the broken gatepost. You'll lead the sheep across the low ridge where the wind changes directions. You will not think of empires, only of hooves in the dust of the sky above. And of how small the human world feels beneath it. The last light of day folds itself gently over the grasses, settling into their blades like sleep, settling into a child's breath around your camp. The step draws quiet again, not by command or decree, but by the natural dimming of the sky. No riders cross the horizon now, no echoes of hooves or banners. Only the hush that comes when the world has turned its face from watching and begun slowly to rest. You finish your tasks without urgency. The gate to the goat pen creaks softly as you secure it. Your daughter has already laid kindling in the hearth. Your wife hums as she stirs the evening pot. The broth is thin, but warm and familiar, tasting faintly of onions, of salt, and of the same earth you've walked upon for years. It fills the yurt with a scent that is neither rich nor poor, just known. Just enough. Your son lingers outside, sits where the grass is flattened under last season's snow, carving slow patterns into the soil with the tip of a stick. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. You've seen that look before, the quiet wondering that follows something vast. He is not thinking about chores or the flock or the stew waiting for him. His thoughts are farther off, carried by dust, trails, and long banners, by the shimmer of distant metal and the straight-backed riders who passed without pause. You step out to join him, folding your legs beneath you. The air is cooler now. The sky is softening into the deep blue of dusk. He says, "Will they come back, Kay?" You, after a moment, reply, "They always do, or others like them." And then you let the silence grow again, neither of you needing to speak more. The empire may pass through your life, but it never stays. It rides over the land like winds, sometimes warm, sometimes cold, always moving, but you remain rooted. You mend fences, boil tea, dry herbs, listen to the bleating of goats and the soft laughter of children chasing chickens in the dust. You do not resist history, nor chase after it. Simply live beneath it, like grass beneath clouds. Later, after supper, the yurt is dim except for the quiet glow of coals. The felt walls hold the warmth. Your children sleep near your feet. Your wife wrapped beneath a worn quilt, stitched long ago. The stars outside shine steadily through the smoke hole, their light older than any empire, older than memory. You lie awake for a while, listening not for soldiers or messengers or news, but for the gentle creaks of wood, the shifting breath of your family, the slow, steady rhythm of a life not driven by urgency. It's a kind of rhythm that is easy to overlook, but impossible to replace. You think of your grandfather's words, how he once said, while sharpening a blade in the quiet of late summer, "The empire may write the laws, but it is we who live the seasons." And now, years later, with your own hands roughened by rope and sun, you understand what he meant. The dust has settled. The banners are gone. The fields lie unbroken, and the step endures, in its calm, in its slowness, in its quiet breath. Empires rise, and they pass. But some things remain. The morning dew, the soft bleating of a newborn lamb, the sound of wool being combed in the sun. You turn onto your side, pull the quilt closer, and feel the weight of sleep draw gently over you like the closing of the sky. And in that final stillness, where thought begins to loosen and dreams prepare their quiet shapes, one last truth whispers across the plain. The riders will not remember your name, but the earth does, and it always will. The earliest light touches the eastern horizon with a hush of pale gold. Miles, it does not rush or dazzle, but spreads with the care of someone lifting a curtain for a sleeping child. Across the vast Mongol steppe, the shadows of night draw back, revealing the soft outline of yurts resting like quiet moons upon the earth. In the stillness of this hour, when even the wind seems to walk more gently, a woman rises from her bedding and steps silently into the awakening world. She is neither young nor old. Her hands have known years, and her eyes carry the calm of someone long familiar with the turning of seasons. She wraps herself in a plain woolen deal, the fabric warm from where it lay beneath her sleeping mat. The texture is coarse, faintly scratchy at the seams, but she does not notice. Her motions are steady, unhurried. She has done this before, each morning, for as long as she can remember. Outside, the breath of dawn is cold and damp, leaving a thin shimmer of dew across the grass. She pulls the yurt flap aside and steps into the day. Behind her, the fires. Embers glow faintly, and her family sleeps a little longer, wrapped in the woven hush of early morning. In her hand, she carries a wooden pail, its handle smooth from countless dawns like this one. Ahead, the livestock pen comes into view: goats, sheep, and the small, shaggy cows known across the steppe for their endurance. But it is the mares that call her now, their breath steaming gently in the morning air. They shift and stamp softly, their long lashes blinking at the slowly rising sun. A few nicker in low voices, as though acknowledging her presence without surprise. The milking begins. She selects the mare who has just foaled in early spring, a creature with a coat like worn parchment and eyes as deep as thawed soil. The foal is nearby, watched over by another woman from a neighboring yurt, swaddled in wool against the crispness of morning. With practiced ease, she ties the mare's back leg to the post, not out of cruelty, but to keep her still. The mare does not flinch. This, too, is part of the morning. She crouches low, knees pressed to the cool earth, and begins. Her fingers, calloused and sure, press and release, press and release. The milk falls into the wooden bucket in soft spurts, a rhythm like raindrops on leaves. It is warm, sweet, with the scent of grass and animal musk. The sound is gentle, oddly soothing, like water echoing in a hollow stone. No one speaks, only the animals shuffle and breathe, and in the distance, first bird calls from the tall grass. This act milking a mare at dawn's far more than daily sustenance. In the Mongol world, mare's milk is revered. It is the base of arag, the lightly fermented drink that accompanies meals, ceremonies, and quiet evenings. It is not intoxicating in excess, but it carries a mild effervescence, a tang of fermentation that awakens the senses. For now, though, this milk is fresh, still heavy with warmth and steam, and will be poured through a straining cloth back of the yurt before its transformation begins. She fills 2 pails before standing again. Her knees creak, but she does not mind. A deep breath fills her lungs, crisp, grassy, edged with the far-off smoke of a neighboring fire being stirred awake. She straightens, brushes her hands along the hem of her robe, and lifts the pails with a quiet strength that lives in her spine. Her path home is the same. Each day a worn track between flattened grass and hoof marks. She passes her cousin, who is carrying a saddle, toward the horses, and they nod in shared silence. The sun is a little higher now, lighting the tops of the yurts in soft gold. The sky above is enormous, pale at the edges, deepening into a crisp blue overhead. There are no trees to interrupt its vastness, only sky and steppe, and the occasional shimmer of a distant herd moving slowly across the morning. Back at the yurt, Tarta is awake. The small girl, still rubbing the sleep from her eyes, sits beside the hearth, feeding dried dung chips to the growing flame. The scent of smoke deepens, mingling now with the faint sweetness of milk and the musty comfort of wool. The woman sets the pails down near the door and begins to pour the fresh milk through a sieve lined with felt. Catching stray hairs and flecks of dust, the milk flows smoothly, pooling into the large leather sack that hangs near the entrance. This sack, dark worn and soft with age, will be hung and churned over the next few days to begin the process of fermentation. When the time is right, the sack will be rocked gently by foot or hand, over and over, until the milk begins to shift, bubbling with tiny breaths of life. But for now, there is only stillness. She ladles a small cup of fresh milk and offers it to her daughter, who sips quietly, eyes still heavy with sleep. They do not speak. Words are not needed here. Only presence. The fire crackles. The pails are cleaned and set to dry. And outside, the wind picks up just slightly, carrying with it the scent of wild herbs and damp earth. You sit now on a low stool beside the hearth, watching her move, watching the steam rise in slow curls from the milk. You think of how many mornings have passed like this across the centuries, how many hands have pressed gently against warm skin, how many wooden buckets have caught the salt white gift of a new day. The light continues to grow, and so too does the quiet certainty of the morning as the morning stretches across the open land. The woman's tasks continue with the same gentle steadiness that shaped her first moments of the day. Her sleeves rolled to her forearms. She gathers a few tools near the hearth, a long-handled wooden paddle, a shallow basin, a strip of soft cloth for straining. These are not new or fine objects. Each is worn with use, smooth by repetition, and stained with the quiet years of utility. Yet each has a place in her hand, and each belongs to this morning. Like birdsong belongs to dawn, the milk, now cooled slightly, is stirred in a wide bowl. She leans over it, and you can see the way. Her breath stirs the surface. The scent is unmistakable, thick and grassy, with the faintest tang, like the memory of distant rain mixed with warmth. She hums as she stirs, not a song of words, but a tone carried on rhythm. It is neither loud nor especially musical, but it fills the air in the way a soft breeze does, present but never demanding attention. The next step is churning. She carefully pours the milk into a large leather sack, known as a kukor. This sack is suspended by ropes from the ceiling pole of the yurt, hanging slightly off-center, so it may swing freely. The leather is thick and soft, smelling faintly of smoke and hide. She begins to rock the sack gently with her foot, pressing it back and forth in a rhythmic motion. It swings like a cradle, making no sound except the soft slosh of liquid and the creak of taut cords. This process, unhurried and without urgency, may take hours. There is no stopwatch here, no exact measure of timely experience, intuition, and the sound of fermentation quietly beginning. As the milk transforms into arag, it gains a new texture, a gentle frothiness, and a slight sourness that sharpens with each hour of gentle movement. She pauses now and then, checking the scent, testing the weight. Sometimes she speaks to the sack softly, as if coaxing it along. It is not superstition, but familiarity, intimacy with the process that can only be born of years. Outside, the sun has climbed higher. The grass sways in long, slow ripples, and the sound of hooves returns her husband, leading the herd to a nearby water source. The animals move in patient formation, their hooves muffled by the softness of the earth. A few calves wander off and are gently turned back by the shepherd dog, who trots with practiced purpose, tail low, eyes alert. Back within the yurt, the woman stirs a pot of leftover millet from the night before. She adds fresh milk, stirring. Slowly, the mixture thickening over the low flame. A touch of salt, a pinch of dried herbs, just enough to nudge the flavor, never to overwhelm it. This will be the midday meal. Simple, but nourishing. Food, like time here, is not for display or abundance. It is for continuity, for warmth. It's for the long stretch of living between seasons. Her daughter sits nearby, stitching a small patch onto her deal. The child hums softly, mimicking her mother's earlier tune. The needle moves in and out of the fabric in a quiet rhythm, like a distant heartbeat. The patch is blue-dyed from crushed berries gathered last summer. The color has faded to something more like smoke, but it still holds the story of that day, of stained fingers, of laughter, of the cold water from the stream where they washed. The pulp away. As the day warms, the woman checks the leather sack once more. The milk inside has shifted less liquid now, more textured. She draws a ladleful into a cup and smells it. A faint fizziness, like wind trapped in a leaf, touches her nose. It is almost ready. She nods to herself, then pours a small sample into a wooden bowl for tasting. Her daughter watches silently. This, too, is part of the learning, watching, waiting, serving the small signs of readiness. She tastes it and closes her eyes for a moment. There is a soft sharpness now, a bubbling temph that lifts at the end of the tongue. It is fresh, still young. By evening, it will deepen further. She offers the bowl to her daughter, who sips and giggles at the tickling sensation on her lips. Later, the woman will pour the finished arag into a tall, narrow-necked vessel and seal it with a felt cap. It will rest in the cool, shadowed side of the yurt, away from the heat, slowly developing its flavor. Some of it will be shared with neighbors. Some will be poured as a small offering onto the ground near a sacred stone outside the camp, a quiet thanks to the spirits of sky and earth. The rest will be sipped slowly across the coming days, passed in cups between conversation, between chores, between silence, as the leather sack swings empty and the woman wipes her hands on a scrap of cloth. The yurt seems to exhale. The hardest part of the day is done. The hearth is fed once more and the embers glow steady. She takes her stool outside and sits, looking across the open land. Her eyes do not search for anything. They rest. The sky is wider now, with a few soft clouds drifting like slow sheep. She watches as her husband returns, the herd trailing behind him like a moving shadow. Their younger son runs out to meet him, arms flung wide, legs kicking up tufts of dry grass. The wind brings the distant sound of laughter, and then quiet again. She leans back slightly, her hands resting on her knees, the wooden cup still warm in her palm. Steam rising in soft billows that smell of home and earth and quiet strength. Spoons are shared, passed from hand to hand. A piece of flatbread is torn and dipped, then passed again. A sip of arag follows cool, faintly sour, with a hint of something wild. It washes down the fat, resets the mouth, invites another bite. It is not a drink for celebration, but for sustenance, for routine. And yet, in this moment, it feels like more as you sit with them, tasting the stew. Listening to the way their voices weave through the evening, you understand that this meal is not just about food. It is about continuity. It's about survival shaped into something warm, something fragrant, something shared. It is about people whose names may never appear in scrolls or stone, but whose lives were stitched together by such moments of quiet, filling, and deeply human. And outside, Steppe waits patiently, its grasses still bowing to the wind, its sky still vast and unchanged. The warmth of the stew lingers in your belly, spreading slowly outward like a small fire placed at your center. The broth, rich with the essence of boiled bone and fat, clings gently to the sides of the wooden bowl. Around you, the members of the household sit in a circle, backs gently curved, legs tucked beneath woolen robes. The soft shuffle of feet, the low murmur of contented voices, and the clinking of spoons form a gentle cadence. A domestic lullaby sung not in lyrics, but in rhythm, now that the appetite is sated. The mood inside the yurt shifts to a softer stillness. The work of the day slows its pulse. The eldest woman of the family, wrinkled and quiet, her hair tucked under a faded scar, leans back with her hands folded in her lap. She speaks only once, a soft comment about the stew's clarity, a compliment passed as lightly as a breeze. Her presence is the seasoning in the room, subtle, grounding, and always present. One of the children rises, is careful not to tip the basin, and fetches a shallow wooden tray filled with small curds of dried milk. Ariel, it is called, crumbled and hard, often sour, its texture like chalk, and its taste deeply rooted in this land. It has rested in a linen sack for weeks, drying beside the fire. Some pieces are tinged faintly with salt, others sharp enough to make the eyes blink. A few are sweetened slightly with berries picked in high summer. The tray is passed from hand to hand, each person selecting a piece as though choosing a memory. These curds, though dry and brittle, are not merely snacks. They are nutrition stored in permanence, food that waits through storms, through long rides, through seasons when fresh milk is rare. They are the taste of endurance, carried in saddlebags across distances, measured not in miles, but in days of wind and sky. After the curds, another cup of arag is poured, this one slightly more mature than before. The fermentation has deepened, its taste is brighter, its scent more pronounced. It foams faintly as it's stirred, catching the light in small bubbles. The cup is passed from person to person, each sip taken with the calm respect of those who understand that the simplest drinks often carry the oldest stories. The children begin to whisper among themselves, their voices soft, their laughter muffled behind their hands. They don't shout or run, not here, not during mealtime. But their joy is visible in their eyes, their sideways glances, their cradling of the last few pieces of bread. One of them begins to trace a circle into the dirt floor with a fingertip, perhaps a thought, perhaps nothing at all. The act is quiet, unspoken, but it becomes part of the moment. The woman who prepared the stew rises slowly and begins to clear the basin. A thin cloth is used to wipe the edges clean before it is set aside to be scrubbed later with river sand. The spoons are stacked together, their carved handles still warm. Nothing is wasted, nothing is hurried. The breadcrumbs are brushed onto a small cloth and shaken out the door. Even those small fragments will not go unseen once the eating is concealed. Once the eating is done, the evening becomes a time for stillness. There is no rush toward activity. The men lean against the felt walls, talking softly about the herds grazing, about a neighbor's new calf, about the tracks near the northern ridge that might belong to foxes. Their conversation drifts, not like a debate, but like smoke from a calm fire. It does not rise sharply. It lingers, spreads, softens. The woman, now seated again, begins to mend a blanket. The wool is thick, the thread a deep round. She works methodically, her needle moving through the layers like a boat through water, slow, precise, with no splash. Her eyes do not dart, they glide. Across from her, a girl spins raw wool onto a spindle, her fingers twisting the fiber into thread. She hums a tune with no words, voice rising and falling in time with the rotation of the spindle's whirl. Outside, the wind begins to pick up slightly. You hear it through the yurt's felt covering, brushing against the structure like a sweeping hand. It carries with it the scent of dry grass and distant animals, mingling with the soft sourness of milk and a faded smoke clinging to every woven rug. The fire inside crackles just once, then settles into a gentle glow. There is comfort here, not just in the food, but in the knowing, in the daily return to the same acts: boiling, cutting, fermenting, sharing. There is no innovation, no surprise, and that is its own peace. The stew is always made with mutton, the tea always salted, the bread always torn by hand. And still, these things never taste quite the same twice. The air changes. The fire's strength shifts. The mood bends slightly with each day's passing. You watch as a small wooden ladle is placed on a high shelf, its handle pointing east, the direction from which morning always comes. There is no ceremony to this gesture, no spoken prayer, yet it feels like reverence. Toward what? It is hard to say. Perhaps toward the rhythm itself, toward the quiet endurance of people who live not for greatness, but for warmth, for work, for the closing of hunger with a full spoon as the sky darkens further. A few of the children begin to curl into quilts. Their cheeks are flushed, their eyelids heavy. One of them still clutches a crust of bread. The woman who cooked the stew brushes the child's hair back and lays another woolen layer across his shoulders. There is no proclamation of bedtime. It simply begins, and in the space where the meal has ended, something else settles in, a gentle quiet, like a bowl turned over after use. Clean, still, waiting. Night has fully arrived on the steppe. Outside the yurt, the sky lies open and vast, wrapped in a soft blackness that glimmers faintly with starlight. No clouds pass, now only the breath of the land rising in cool drafts across the grass and the quiet stillness of animals tucked close in sleep. The herds, gathered and silent, form dark mounds across the earth, their breathing soft, rhythmic, and slow. A low snort from a horse, the stretch of a cow's limbs, a distant flutter of wings, these are the lullabies of the steppe inside the yurt. The remnants of the evening meal had been cleaned and tucked away. The basin, rinsed and turned upside down, rests near the door. The spoons, dried and stacked, gleam faintly in the firelight. The last ladle of arag has been sipped, and the leather fermentation sack hangs quiet and half-emptied, swaying faintly in the breeze that sneaks through the seam of the door flap. Nothing has been wasted. Nothing has been left behind. Everything finds its place. The woman who cooked the stew sits once more by the hearth, her hands folded gently across her lap. Her eyes are heavy, not with weariness, but with the calm that comes when the day has fulfilled its quiet purpose. Round her, her family lies under quilts and furs, breathing in unison with the heartbeat of the earth beneath them. The warmth of the boiled meat still lingers in their bellies, a slow burning comfort that needs no further tending. She closes her eyes for a moment and listens. The yurt creaks faintly in its joints, the felt walls shifting with the cooling air. Spark, and the firebed snaps, then falls into quiet ash. Above, through the smoke hole in the roof, the stars peer down in absolute silence. They are the same stars her grandmother watched, and her grandmother before her. They do not speak, and yet their presence says enough. Her thoughts drift gently to the pot of stew that simmered for hours, to the aroma of bone and broth rising in slow curls, to the moment when her daughter dipped her bread into the basin, her eyes bright, her voice hushed in thanks, to the way the eerie had tasted today's lightly more sour than the last batch, the bubbles lingering on the lip of the cup before vanishing like dew. These are not grand memories. They are not etched in stone or carried by songs, but they are hers, and they are enough, she thinks, too. Of the land beyond the Ur, the sweep of the steppe stretching endlessly in all directions. Somewhere far to the west, a caravan may be making its slow passage through the valleys. To the south, a band of riders may be moving toward the edge of empire. But here, in this circle of felt and wool, life moves at its own pace, untouched by the grand motions of kings and conquests. Here, the fire is still warm. The air is still quiet. The stew has been eaten and the people have been fed. She rises slowly, adjusting the quilt around her youngest child, tucking it beneath his chin with a hand that lingers. The child shifts slightly in his sleep, but does not wake. His lips are stained faintly with the traces of broth, his hair damp from the warmth of the fire. She brushes a strand from his forehead, then returns to her mat near the hearth before lying down. She pours a final cup of salted milk tea from a clay pot kept warm at the edge of the coals. The woman watches her, but offers correction only when the edge curves too sharply or the seam begins to fray. Instruction here is gentle given through touch, through example, through rhythm. Together they shape the pieces. The woman punches holes along the edges with a bone awl, then threads sinew with beeswax and draws it through, letting her daughter mirror her actions stitch by stitch. The leather squeaks faintly beneath the pressure of pulling, and the thread glides through like breath. The pouches they make are simple, intended for flint, for herbs, for small coils of thread. Nothing grand, nothing ornamental, but they are durable, and they will serve as they work. The woman tells a story, not loudly, but in the even, slow cadence of afternoon conversation. Kate is about a distant aunt who once crafted a saddlebag so strong it lasted through 4 migrations without a tear. She describes how that aunt wove a sliver of her own hair into the seam, believing it bound her strength into the fibers. The daughter listens, eyes down, hands working, a quiet smile on her lips. She does not ask if the story is true. In this world, truth often folds into usefulness. When the leatherwork is finished, they rise and stretch. The daughter carries the finished pouches to a nearby chest, placing them inside with the same care she might give to something fragile. Key. The woman steps outside. The air is brighter now, the sky an uninterrupted blue. The sun has passed its peak, and the grasses have turned their blades in the breeze. She walks slowly toward the drying felt, testing its firmness with her palm. It has begun to stiffen, but still yields slightly. It will need more time. Nearby, the saddle she repaired earlier lies across a wooden stand, warming in the sunlight. She picks it up and runs her hand along the stitching clean, taut, unbroken. The leather is pliable now, the surface supple with oil. She turns it over slowly, her fingers lingering in the indentations where years of riders once sat. She imagines where it will go next, perhaps to the hills west of the Orcan River, where pasture land bends with the wind and wolves run in shadows. Perhaps to the marketplace, tied to a mare carrying bundles of dried fish. Wherever it travels, it will carry with it her hands, her time, her invisible labor pressed into every seam. She carries the saddle inside, placing it near the door for easy collection. Her body aches faintly, no, not painfully, but with the kind of fatigue that reminds her she has worked well. She pours the last of the tea into a small cup and sits cross-legged on a woolen mat. The warmth of the drink spreads through her again, this time more deeply. Reaching into her limbs and joints, she thinks, then, not of what remains to be done, but of the satisfaction of having repaired something broken, of having shaped something raw into something useful. There is no ceremony in this, no offering, no applause, only quiet continuance, only the knowledge that the yurt is stronger now, that the family will sleep more warmly, that the next journey will ride more smoothly. She lifts the cup once more and finishes the last sip. Then she closes her eyes and listens not for anything in particular, but for everything at once, as the day gives way to evening. The yurt glows with a quiet warmth, its felt walls touched softly by the fading light. The fire in the hearth burns low but steady, the coals no longer eager, but content to breathe their slow, even heat into the space. Outside, the sky melts from bright blue into a deepening gold, then blushes rose before beginning its final descent into twilight. It is the hour when sounds soften, when even the wind moves more gently, as if mindful not to disturb the hush of work completed. The artisan sits again beside the drying felt, now nearly firm and set. She runs her hand across its surface, her fingers tracing the thick matting, still slightly damp near the edges. The wool has locked into itself, resisting pull and tear. It is heavier than cloth, denser than hide, and yet its warmth holds steady like breath. She nods quietly. It will serve well as a wall panel, shielding against the cold winds that rise sharply across the plains when the seasons begin to shift. She thinks of how many such panels she has made over the years, each one unique. The shadows lengthen further, the livestock shuffle into tighter circles near the edge of camp. Few yurts in the distance glow with firelight, their smoke curling into the cooling air. Nearby, someone begins to sing a low tune, more hum than melody. It drifts across the grasses, soft and wordless, as if even the voice understands that this is not the time for brightness, but for settling, died inside. The daughter helps fold the leather scraps into neat bundles, tying each with a strip of sinew. The scraps will be used later for mending shoes, reinforcing water flasks, patching sacks. Nothing is discarded. Every edge, every remnant holds value. The girl glances at her mother for approval, and the woman offers a small nod. No praise is needed. The shared silence is enough. The saddle is fetched by its owner, just as the sky deepens into a purplish blue. He enters with a word of thanks and lifts the repaired piece gently, his fingers tracing the fresh stitching. He doesn't ask questions. He doesn't barter. The saddle is whole again, and that is what matters. Before he leaves, he presses a small bundle into the woman's hands, dried juniper berries and a length of dyed wool. Not payment, not obligations, an exchange of gratitude. It's passed without ceremony. She tucks the gifts into her sewing chest, laying them beside bone needles and spools of twisted sinew. The juniper scent escapes faintly into the air, woody, sharp, slightly sweet. She breathes it in and closes the lid. Another day's work done. The fire is stirred once more for tea. The flame flutters back to life, thin and quiet. A kettle is placed upon it with a careful hand, and soon the scent of buttered milk and salt rises again, familiar and comforting. She pours slowly, her hands steady despite the day's labor. The tea is cloudy, smooth, and steaming. She hands a cup too, her daughter, and sips from her own. It is not a drink for indulgence, but for peace. It warms from within and settles the body. Now the night fully arrives. Stars begin to appear above the dome of the yurt, glimpsed through the small opening overhead. First, just one, then another, until they begin to cluster like quiet watchers in the sky. The moon is thin tonight, only a crescent, barely marking its presence. The air outside is cool and dry, filled with the scent of trampled grass and the faint musk of animals bedding down. She finishes the last of her tea, wipes the rim of the cup with the edge of her sleeve, and places it on the low table. Round her, the yurt has quieted. The tools have been returned to their places, the scraps bundled, the wool set aside for tomorrow. There is no clutter, no disorder. Everything has returned to its resting state. She lies down, not abruptly, but gradually, first easing herself onto the mat, then stretching her legs beneath the heavy quilt. Her back curves naturally against the slope of the floor, her head cradled by a pillow filled with felt shavings. Her daughter curls beside her, her breath already slowing into the rhythm of sleep. And as she closes her eyes, the artisan does not think of ambition or reward. She does not dream of travel or wealth. She thinks of her hands, the quiet ache in her knuckles, the smoothness of oiled leather, the warmth of fresh felt beneath her palm. She thinks of how each object she shapes, mends, or softens becomes part of the yurt, the family, the journey. It is work not meant to be remembered by name, but by use, not celebrated, but returned to day after day. Work that holds the wind at bay, that cradles a rider, that wraps a child in warmth. The night deepens further, wrapping the world in soft dark. No voices remain. Only the whisper of wind against wool. Only the soft crackle of a dying fire. Only breath and sleep, and a distant sound of stars turning slowly above the steppe. The scent is familiar milk, salt, smoke, and something faintly woody. She sips it slowly, savoring its heat, its grounding simplicity. It soothes her throat, quiets her thoughts, prepares her for rest. There is no ceremony in this, it's just habit, just care. Outside, the wind has calmed to a murmur. The grass barely stirs. The dog near the yurt gives one soft grunt and rolls into sleep, its nose tucked beneath its tail. A night bird calls once and is answered. Then silence again. She lies down, the quilt drawn up to her chin, her head cradled by a pillow stuffed with dried grass and wool. Her body curls into the familiar shape it always takes when sleep begins. Not out of habit, but because it is how she fits into this world. Her final thoughts are not of tomorrow. They are not worried or afraid. They are not even of hope. They are of the meal, simple and hot, shared without fanfare, of the way the spoon felt in her hand, of the way the broth shimmered in the bowl, of the sound the air egg made, as it was, poured a soft fizz, the hollow glug, the settling silence. These things are small, but in their repetition, they become sacred, not in the sense of religion, but in the sense of belonging, of purpose. The fire dims further, its glow, now a faint ember, like the eye of an animal watching from beneath a blanket. The yurt breathes quietly, its walls holding the warmth of those who rest within. The earth holds them all, the sheep, the horses, the woman, her family, the food they ate, the dreams they will enter soon, and above, the stars continue to shimmer. Not loudly, not bright, just enough. The sun has not yet risen when the artisan begins her work. In the half-light before dawn, the yurt is a quiet shell still and wrapped in coolness, its felt walls gently exhaling the breath of night. She stirs from her bedding with practiced ease, her limbs slow but certain. There is no alarm to wake her, no clanging bell, only the rhythm of necessity and the soft tug of tasks that have waited silently through the dark hours. She kneels first by the hearth, coaxing life from last night's embers. Handful dried dung is placed with care beneath a small pile of kindling, and with a few well-aimed breaths and the strike of flint, a flame curls into being. It crackles gently, casting amber light across the interior of the yurt. Shapes begin to return: bundles of wool, wrapped in cloth, tools hanging from wooden pegs. In the long saddlebag that waits patiently in the corner, its leather seams, splitting from long travel and heavier loads. She does not rush. Her day will be long, and there is no reason to chase it. Instead, she begins slowly, pulling her shawl tighter across her shoulders and setting a small pot of salted milk tea above the flame. The scent of smoke, familiar and grounding, creeps upward into the canvas ceiling. Outside, the faint bleat of sheep drifts on the breeze, and the gentle stamping of hooves suggests the animals, too, are beginning to stir. Her fingers reach for the wool-thick matted clumps gathered from the spring shearing. It carries the scent of sheep and dust and sun, even after washing. She begins to card it gently, pulling the fibers apart with two flat paddles bristling with wire teeth. The sound is soft, like paper being torn under water. Slowly, the wool fluffs into clouds, light and airy. This is the first stage of felt making, and one she knows well. Each pull, each stroke, is deliberate, an act learned not from scrolls or words, but from watching her mother's hands many seasons ago, with the carded wool ready. She lays it out upon a reed mat and layers first lengthwise, then across, then lengthwise again. The mat is old, its edges frayed, but it holds the memory of many felts before this one. Over the wool, she pours warm water scented faintly with ash and herbs. The wool darkens, the fibers drink, and the smell deepens something earthy, something animal, something ancient. She begins to roll the mat, slowly pressing and kneading it with her palms. The wool resists at first, then begins to yield, the barbs of each fiber locking into the others. Outside, the sky is beginning to brighten, a soft silver stretching along the horizon. The fire inside the yurt is steady now, and the milk tea steams gently, filling the air with its salted, buttery scent. She pauses to sip, the warmth spreading down her throat. Her lips are chapped from the wind, but the tea soothes them. She drinks without distraction, her eyes half closed, listening to the first full calls of morning birds, when the felt has begun to take shape dense. Springy and firm under her fingers, she sets it aside to rest and turns her attention to the saddle. It lies beside her in the shadows, the leather cracked at the seams, its stitching frayed from long rides and many loadings. It has belonged to her cousin for years, and now, before their next migration, it must be made whole. She unrolls her tool pouch, curved needles, strips of sinew, a small awl, beeswax to ease the stitching, and a stone for smoothing the leather surface. She runs her hand along the saddle's body, noting each tear, each loosened thread. She speaks softly as she works not to anyone, but to the task itself, as if naming its parts will help them come back together. It is not magic, but memory. These saddles have shaped the journeys of her people for generations. Her needle moves, slowly, deliberately. The sinew, softened between her fingers, pulls through the leather with a sound like a whisper through cloth. She knots the end, pulls tight, checks the seam. The motion repeats, over and over, forming a rhythm of its own, silent, persistent, grounded. The scent of leather begins to rise under her hands, warm and rich. She applies a thin layer of tallow with a strip of wool, massaging it into the surface until the saddle darkens slightly and softens. She works by touch more than sight, the texture of the leather speaking more clearly than its appearance. Rough spots, thinning patches, dry edges, all are met with care. She does not speak of the journey this saddle will take. She does not need. 2. It will carry goods, perhaps a child, perhaps cheese wrapped in felt, or grain in leather sacks. It may cross rivers, or deserts, or wind-whipped plains. It may see battle, though she hopes not. It is not her place to decide. Her task is only to prepare it for whatever the road may bring. By now, the sun has risen fully, casting long bands of light across the grass outside. Shadows of moving animals stretch toward the yurt. A young boy passes by with a stick, leading goats to a new patch of pasture. He glances in and smiles. She nods in return. These exchanges need no language. She sets the saddle aside when it is done, her hands stained faintly with oil and dust. The stitching is clean and strong, the edges smooth, the seat padded anew. It is not a beautiful saddle, but it is whole. It will serve again, and as she returns to the felt, unrolling it and testing its firmness, she breathes in the mingled smells of wool, leather, smoke, and morning wind. These are the smells of her labor, quiet, patient, invisible to most. They are the scent of creation, of repair, of resilience shaped by hand. The morning moves onward with quiet dignity. The air within the yurt is warm now, steeped in the lingering scent of firewood and stretched wool. A thin shaft of sunlight enters through the smoke hole above, catching in the faint dust that hangs in the air like a curtain of gold threads. The artisan has returned to her work on the felt, her palms damp from water and effort, her sleeves rolled to the elbows, her mind tethered to the subtle movements of fiber and pressure. The felt has begun to firm beneath her hands. She kneads it with a slow, weighty rhythm, pressing her body into the motion as though shaping not just fabric, but memory. The mat is unrolled and re-rolled, pounded and rolled again. There is no haste. Felt must be coaxed, not commanded. Too much pressure, too soon, and the fibers lock too tightly, making the sheet brittle. Too little, and the wool remains loose, like breath that never caught in the throat. Outside, the herders call to one another over the low rise of the hills. Their voices drift in and out of earshot, softened by wind and distance. Occasionally, the faint clang of a bell sounds as one of the goats moves too far from the group. These noises come and go, but they do not interrupt. They are part of the yurt's soundscape, woven into the fabric of work and waking. She adds hot water against teeming, herbal, and sharp. The wool steams under her palms, and the scent intensifies. Thick animal, slightly sour. Not unpleasant, but primal. She closes her eyes for a moment and breathes it in, feeling herself connect to every woman who ever sat by a hearth and shaped wool into something more. Felt is not woven. It is not stitched. It is born through compression, through friction, through the slow locking of fibers that hold fast to one another without thread or needle. It is strength without seam. Once the felt reaches its final density, she lifts it from the mat. It is heavier now, resistant to folding. She drapes it over a wooden frame set outside to dry in the sun. It hangs like a thick tapestry, dull gray with hints of cream, still dripping slightly from the last wash. It will dry over hours, and when it does, it will form a new panel for the yurt, a replacement for one that grew thin last winter near the windward side. Her daughter arrives soon after, bringing with her a sack of softened leather scraps that need shaping into pouches and reins. The girl is still learning. Her hands are nimble, but untested. The woman passes her a pair of scissors and a short blade, then settles beside her on the ground. They do not speak at first. Tools pass back and forth with gestures and glances. The girl cuts slowly, pausing often. The step awakens, not with noise, but with motions, steady and low to the ground. In the hush of early light, before the sky has fully remembered its blue, the herds begin to stir. A goat shifts its hooves in the dew. A yak lifts its heavy head, and the sheep, clustered like sleeping clouds, begin to stretch and nuzzle the earth for fresh grass. But there are no fences here, no walls to hem them in. Just the slow-moving rhythm of life in motion, carried across the wide, open plain. You are among them now, as a visitor, not as a master, but as their quiet keeper. Your feet tread the same paths each morning, worn not by boots, but by repetition. A looped rope hangs over your shoulder, frayed at the ends, and softened by use. Your staff, polished smooth where your hand has gripped it most, rests gently against your palm. The animals know your shape, your scent, the timbre of your voice. You do not drive them. You move with them. The sun rises slowly over the horizon, casting long golden shadows that stretch across the plain like brushstrokes. Each beam catches in the wool of the sheep, illuminating them from behind in glowing halos. Their breath curls into the air soft, white, and fading quickly. The scent of animal hides, grass dampened by dew, and the faint hint of dung hangs around you. Not unpleasant, just ever present. It is the smell of work, of presence, of a life lived close to the earth. The goats move first, as they always do, more independent, more curious. They climb the low ridge to the east, nibbling at thistles and brush. One of the younger kids leaps onto a stone and pauses, tail flicking in the light. The sheep follow behind, slower, more measured. Their hooves press gently into the soil, parting the grass without scarring it. The yaks, larger and slower still, bring up the rear. Their long coats sway like curtains, picking up the dust and the morning's moisture in equal measure. Each type of animal has its place. The sheep give you wool, soft and fine. The goats give milk and meat. The yaks offer strength their hides, their hair, their milk richer and heavier than any other. You rely on them all, not as a merchant might rely on a ledger, but as one. Body relies on its limbs. They feed you, clothe you, carry your burdens, and they do not ask for more than water, space, and the occasional guiding word. You walk beside them, your steps unhurried. The sun rises higher, and the grass begins to dry. Its scent changes from green and wet to sweet and hay-like. Birds flutter overhead in slow arcs, calling softly to one another. You pass a patch of earth where the grass has been flattened. In a wide circle last week's night camp. The imprint of dozens of bodies still lingers, though the herd has long moved on. Nothing is permanent here, but everything leaves its trace. Occasionally, you whistle, not loudly, just a soft trill meant to steer a goat back toward the group or to coax a hesitant sheep over a shallow stream. The animals listen, though they rarely look. They respond to tone, to timing, to familiarity. Some of them you know by pattern along the white one with a dark spot on her shoulder, the broad-chested yak with a notched ear, the goat who always strays and always returns. They are not pets, but they are not strangers either. Mid-morning comes, and the herd reaches the pasture land chosen for the day. It is not rich, but it is enough tall grasses interspersed with low shrubs, and a small depression where rainwater still lingers in a shallow pool. The animals settle into grazing, their heads bowed, jaws moving in slow rhythm. The sound is constant but soft, tearing, chewing, swallowing. It is the sound of peace, of sufficiency. You find a place to sit nearby, a patch of earth warmed by the rising sun. You remove your outer cloak and lay it beneath you, feeling the heat seep through the fabric and into your spine. From a pouch at your side, you pull out a piece of hard cheese and a folded round of bread. The cheese smells sharp and old, and the bread is dry, but together they fill you. You sip from a leather flask water drawn from the spring near camp. It tastes of stone and coldness. You drink deeply as the animals graze. You repair a broken halter. The leather strap has frayed where the buckle once sat, worn by weather and pulled by years of use. You cut the edge clean with your knife, smooth it against your palm, and begin to bore a new hole with your awl. The rhythm of this small work matches the rhythm of the animals around you, slow, steady, useful. A cloud passes overhead, casting a wide shadow. The temperature dips slightly. Few of the sheep lie down, their stomachs round with grazing. The goats cluster near a low rise, their silhouettes sharp against the sky. The yaks stand still, as if carved from the land itself. You watch them all with a gaze that is not vigilant, but attuned. You do not hurt them with noise or command. You hurt them with knowing the shape of the land, the direction of wind, the speed of a shadow. You understand that a goat, straying west, might find a hole in the ground, that the sheep will follow each other until one remembers to stop. You know when a yak is tired, not by its voice, but by the way it leans into the hill. There is no clock here, no calendar. The herd tells time. When they begin to move again, you will rise. When they grow restless, it will be time to turn back. When they cluster near the southern ridge, you'll know they are ready for home. For now, you rest in their midst, keeper of the silent herd. And the steppe, wide and watchful, continues to breathe around you. The herd grazes in slow waves, rising and settling like breath drawn from the lungs of the steppe itself. By midday, the animals have spread across the pasture in loose constellations, goats to the hill's edge, sheep in clustered pockets among the scrub, yaks in the shallow basin where grass grows thickest. The wind shifts slightly, brushing your cheek with the warmth of distant, dry plains, mingled with the faint scent of crushed herbs beneath hooves. You do not call them back. You do not need to. This is their rhythm, and you move within it. The grass here will last until late afternoon. You rise from your seat with a quiet stretch, your spine creaking softly, and walk toward the goats. One has caught its leg in a hollow nothing deep, but enough to cause it to stumble. You kneel, speaking softly, a wordless hum in your throat. The goat shivers as you lift its leg, free it, and rub gently along the joint. It limps a little, then returns to grazing without complaint. You do not expect thanks, and none is given. A small flock of birds lands nearby, their wings brushing the grass with the barest whisper. They pick among the droppings and trampled shoots, their tiny bodies darting like flickers of thought. Watch them for a while. Everything in this world has its place. The animals, the wind, the birds, the watcher. The sun stands high now. Heat begins to ripple across the land. The wool on the sheep shimmers with sweat and dust. The yaks turn, their massive heads toward the wind, lifting their faces as if to ask the sky for relief. You untie a folded cloth from your belt, a square of light felt hand, dip it into your flask before pressing it to the back of your neck. The water soaks in quickly, leaving behind a coolness that fades as soon as it's felt. Still, it is enough. You count the animals, not aloud, but silently, by habit. There were 21 goats this morning, now 20. One has wandered farther than the others, up along the northern ridge, where the land begins to roll unevenly. You whistle low, 2 notes, rising. The goat pauses, ears twitching, then turns and begins to wander back, unhurried. These small rituals, counting, watching, correcting, are your language with them, a language without words. The pregnant away by the way she carries her. Wait, the old ram by the stiffness in his shoulders. You can tell when a yak is about to lie down simply by the tilt of its head. The herd is not just yours. It is you, extended outward in wool and hide. You settle again on a rise, your staff across your knees, and allow your gaze to soften. The steppe stretches outward in every direction. It has no fences, no markers, no signs. And yet you know every slope and patch of water, every cluster of grass that grows sweeter than the rest. You know where the wind shifts suddenly in the afternoon and where it carries the dust of far-off lands. You know which hollows fill with water after rain, and which ones only promise to, occasionally. Think of the towns beyond the plain places, with roofs, markets, voices that rise above a whisper. You've passed through them before, with a herd smaller than this, trading wool for salt, cheese for flour, and once a young goat for a new blade. But they are not home. The noise echoes there in your bones. The steppe does not echo. Tease. One of the sheep bleats long and low, a sound less of distress and more of boredom. Others respond. A few begin to move toward the western edge of the field, where the grass thins and the ground firms. It is nearly time. You rise slowly, brushing the dust from your robe, and begin to circle the herd in wide, even arcs. Its presence alone is enough to steer them. No dog barks, no whip cracks, just motion, steady and sure. The goats fall in line first, heads bobbing, tails flicking. Then the sheep, less precise, more prone to tangents. The yaks are last to move, their bulk commanding space, even in stillness. You wait for them, knowing they will follow. They always do. The walk back to camp is long but gentle. The sun begins to tilt westward, casting everything in softer colors. The grass darkens, the wind cools. A hawk circles overhead once, then veers away. You walk behind the herd, adjusting pace, guiding with small shifts of weight and gesture. The animals understand. They do not rush, nor do they stray. The day is closing, and they feel it too, as you near the encampment. The shape of the yurts comes into view low, rounded silhouettes nestled into the land like sleeping animals. Thin columns of smoke rise from their chimneys, curling in quiet spirals into the evening sky. The scent of cooking rides on the wind, broth, salt, the sharp tang of fermented milk. You feel it draw you inward, not with urgency, but with promise. You open the small gate of the night pen and stand aside. The animals pass through one by one, their hooves muffled in the worn grass. The goats settle quickly, clustering near a low wall. The sheep spread out, some already lying down, others pawing softly at the ground before kneeling. The yaks find their places, heavy bodies lowering into silence. You walk among them once more, checking for wounds, for limbs, for anything unusual. You pause at the older Awe, your hand on her flank. She breathes evenly. Her eyes are clear. You murmur something, a soft string of sounds without meaning, but not without purpose. Then you turn and leave the pen, closing the gate behind you with a wooden latch that clicks softly into place. The sky is lavender now, the horizon brushed in peach and steel. You lean on your staff for a moment, stretching your shoulders. The day has passed without incident, without change. That, to you, is success. And as the last of the light fades, the herd breathes together in the penicillin, content and safe. You watch them for a while longer, your eyes tracing their stillness like a familiar prayer. Dusk has passed now. Last of the sun has melted beneath the horizon, leaving behind a sky draped in deep indigo, speckled with soft stars and brushed faintly by the long ribbon of the Milky Way. The steppe, so wide and full beneath the day, has hushed itself into a kind of sacred stillness, not empty, not barren, just resting. The animals have settled into their evening postures. The goats curl into small piles, heads nestled against warm flanks, their thin bleats now replaced by the occasional sleepy shift of hooves. The sheep lie in clusters, shoulder to shoulder, their wool glowing faintly in the starlight. The yaks, ever the last to settle, move once, twice, and then grow still, their massive shapes anchoring the far side of the pen like gentle sentinels. You stand for a moment longer at the gate, one hand resting on the post, the other holding your staff upright in the earth. You breathe in deeply. The air has changed again, cooler now, touched with the crispness that tells of morning to come. The scents of the day have faded, replaced by the sharpness of clean earth, the mellow smoke of distant hearths, and the musky warmth of sleeping animals. The night watch begins, not with command, but with instinct. You walk the perimeter once, checking for gaps in the fence, for signs of disturbance. There are none. A patch of earth has been rubbed smooth by the sheep's hooves, bent tuft of grass where a yak lay. Nothing more. Satisfied, you return to your small corner of the camp. A simple stool, a woolen wrap, a cup of salted tea, now lukewarm, resting on a flat stone. You lower yourself down, easing your back against the post, and close your eyes briefly, not to sleep, just to settle nearby. Someone hums a lullaby too, faint to catch the words, if there are any. The melody rises and falls like the breeze, a soft creak of a yurt door, the quiet clink of a ladle against a pot. These sounds blend with the nighttime chorus of insects, the far-off yip of a fox, the wind shifting its course over low hills. You open your eyes again and glance toward the herd. Their silhouettes rise and fall with each breath. A goat twitches in its sleep, a sheep sighs through its nostrils, a yak shifts slightly, snorting and settling once more. You know them by these movements, just as they know you by yours. It is a partnership not bound by ownership, but by time and care. Your hand rests now on your staff, not for guarding, just for grounding. It is smooth, worn from years of use, the shape of your grip permanently imprinted into its curve. A trusted tool, silent and strong. You sip the last of the tea. It is cool, but it steadies you. The salt lingers on your lips, a reminder of the day's labor of sweat and wind and fire. You place the cup beside you and pull your wrap more tightly around your shoulders. It smells of wool and sun and days gone by. The stars begin to bloom overhead, brighter now, their light, soft, and clean. You tilt your head back and watch them without urgency. The constellations you've known since childhood return, some with names, some without. You follow their paths across the sky, noting their angles, their drift. In this vast openness, you never feel small. You feel placed. Time does not hurry here. The night stretches long, but not coldly. The earth is not empty, but filled with the quiet breathing of creatures that trust you enough to sleep near. That, too, is a kind of peace. Eventually, you rise, roll your shoulders, and walk once more past the pen, just to be sure, just to see. All is well. A soft grunt, a gentle snore, a tiny, tall normal. You place a hand briefly on the gate, the wood smooth beneath your fingers, and then turn back toward the yurt where your bedding waits. Before entering, you pause. The sky is deep now, full of night's hush. The wind has slowed. The fire has faded to embers. The animals rest. The land holds you in its vast, quiet palm. And in this stillness, as you lie down and pull the woolen quilt over your body, you carry the rhythm of the herd with you arise. In fall of breath, the slow arc of hooves across soil, the softness of wool against wool, the warmth of presence. Sleep does not surprise you. It arrives as it should, gently, thoroughly, without sound. And out in the dark, under stars, both silent and old, the herd dreams with you.